This is The In Show, and I'm your host, Gus Summers. Good to be back with you today. We are broadcasting live, that's right, from the Sunset Strip in the entertainment capital of the world, Hollywood. And we have a great in-studio guest. I guess I can call him a Renaissance man. We're having such a great conversation of everything this gentleman has done, Mr. George Francisco. George, how's everything going today?
We're good. We're good, Gus. Thank you so much for having me. And you're right. We are lucky here living in the Golden State, aren't we? The progressive capital of the world.
You know, talking with so many people, you find out how their perspective changes when they get here. For me, I'm a lifer. I was born and raised here, leave and come back like a Terry one. And it's interesting when you talk with somebody, and they say, you know what? Wow, my perspective has changed. I had this view of Hollywood, and depending good or bad, depending which way they go, their perspective widens. Going along that lines, I wanted to find out from you. I know you've come from Chicago. You've been here 20 plus years. How's your perspective changed when you got to LA? Did you have a preconceived notion?
I'm from the south side of Chicago, and it's a very working class place, and it sort of has all the things you would think of when you hear those words jammed together. And I very much, my block that I grew up on looks like where they shot Backdraft. So if you think of the movie Backdraft with guys like that, that is exactly how I grew up, but I always loved California. It was sort of like, maybe just it was the Golden State, the progressive state. They got things figured out there when I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. And as much as I liked my Chicago sports teams, I'm not as sort of buffoonish as my friends are that are Chicago sports fans, but the LA teams were always my second favorite teams, the Kings and the Dodgers, even the Rams. I'm waiting for the Rams to come back.
And the Raiders when they were here, or no?
The Raiders are Oakland's team.
That's Oakland. Rams are only nice.
Yeah, but so I always sort of looked to California because it was a place that was progressive and a place where they pushed the envelope. It was a place where maybe it was where entertainment was made, but it was more of a bigger picture of being in California. So even though I'm always a Chicagoan from the South Side, I really consider myself an Angelino. So my perspective is not so much changed or broadened, but certainly reinforced, and very happy with my choice. So I consider myself an adopted son.
Nice, nice. I know because you've been here for so long, and you had talked about off air, all the different kind of life turns that you've had. And here you are. We're going to be talking about your film, the very reason you're here. And, all the different things that, through life that you've experienced. But now you're here, LA, making films, doing what you obviously love. Were you wanting to make films when you were back in Chicago? I know you're a big sports guy. Was sports more the way you wanted to go?
I started off acting as a little kid, and I was in, maybe because I was raised by a single mother, and, what's a single mother going to do with a kid except send him to the park? In that era, in that generation, where we were allowed to have public parks that had public programs, and so I would go to the field house, and one of the programs was drama. So I started as a very little kid in drama classes, and I was not very good. And probably the only person that was worse than me was a guy named John C. Riley, who obviously has practiced very much and done much better. So, so I did this for a very long time, from being a little kid all the way into high school. And then at a certain point, I realized that if my future may have involved like performance, but it was certainly performance, not on a stage, but on sort of like a grass with white lines and stripes and people keeping score and things like that. So even today, still very difficult for me to have a conversation into a microphone. I feel much more comfortable having a one-on-one conversation personally and allowing other people to do that. So I think that's why I gravitated towards the sort of nuts and bolts end of the business.
So this is kind of new for you.
It is. We mentioned before, because it's always a good joke, but I played football in college, and we were a historically losing team. And when you are news in New York City, at Columbia, where I went to, you're national news. So we were sort of one of the first tabloid sports stories. We were one of the top 10 sports stories of the 80s, and the only time I ever got interviewed was for people to ask me questions about what it was like to be a losing football player. So it's refreshing to, even though I'm going to sell it as much as I can, because it makes for a funny story here with you, but I'm not actually used to people asking me questions that involve like what my opinion is on things. Refreshing.
Besides asking what kind of tree you would be if you.
Yes, true. I was asked one time what kind of a tree I would be, and I responded a weeping willow. Just I still have it. My sense of sarcasm is intact, even to this day.
That's great. That's great. You know, it's when you were talking, you were mentioning all these little things. I thought, what an adventure life can be. If you didn't have a sense of humor, you would think, why would someone ask me that type of question? Didn't they realize we're already feeling bad enough? But you took it with a grain of salt. You like to bring it up. You bring it up. You laugh about it, and that's great. I can see how you can get through life. From what you were telling me, you're growing up, and the people, life experiences you've had, how it could pull you down. But you have such a wonderful demeanor. You are,
Well, I'm old. When I was a young guy, it took a lot of years for me. I figured if everybody else is going to be laughing at me, I might as well join in because I'm missing the joke.
I'm thinking, what are you talking about? We look to be about the same age. I'm probably much more because I got this big beard.
It's the miles. That's all it is for me.
Nice.
That is all it is. But you said something interesting before that I have a bad habit. If you ask me what time it is, I'll tell you how to build a clock. So I have to apologize beforehand. But you said something about your point of view in terms of being a transplant, even though
yes.
I can consider myself an Angelino. I was not born in Seal Beach like you were. I was not born by the water, no matter how much love I have for my adopted home. But certainly in working in the entertainment industry, you do have a different perspective. And really for me, you can sift through sort of the tabloid, you can sift through all the negative things people say about it, but really the one thing that over a 20-year career up and down in the business that I really learned is that it is a business, and you don't think about that. You think about the things you see and what you personally take back from the craft and the art. And when you're involved in it, you really understand that there's a craft, there's a nuts and bolts to it. It's a business and a company town the way New York is a town run by the stock exchange, the way Chicago is run by the mercantile, and used to be certainly by the meat processing business. It's a town that the business stretches out and reaches into in a lot of ways. And it was comforting to me in a way, because I grew up with guys who worked at the Board of Trade in Chicago, that was, and I really understood what it meant to be a company town. It wasn't just, that was the old LA Times line, right? In the calendar section, company town once a week. But I really started to understand it. There was a sense of comfort there to understand that, there's sort of a bigger thing that encompasses all the people that work in it, from the people that make a costume, to the people that are extras, to the people who write and direct, produce, run the studios, drive the trucks. It's sort of a comforting thought, and at least politically, it's one of the reasons why I really am impressed with our mayor recently wanting to promote in-state, in-city production. I had a lot of issues with production flight to Canada. Just for the simple reason that as a young writer, plenty of people came up to me and said, hey, you want to know, we can shoot this script, but you want to know what? We're going to pay you $1.25 and your name can't be on it. So, just getting paid was a good thing, but then when they tell you your name can't be on it, well, because we need a Canadian writer and it has to meet Cavco, and it was eye-opening for me, and it made me look at what we do here in Hollywood as creative professionals, and just as craftsmen and as industry professionals that sort of don't have anything to do with writing, directing, or making costumes, or some of those things, working with your creative tools and people that are more sort of blue collar people, but we're all part of the same business, and it was nice to see the production stop flying to Canada. Obviously not a good thing because of exchange rates for us, but now it goes all over the place. It goes to New Mexico, it goes to Louisiana, and I was just really got a great feeling from seeing our mayor get up there, and obviously a guy who's done bit parts in movies, and also I might add an alumni of Columbia University, as am I, proud alumni. But it was really nice to see somebody actually in leadership take the reins and say, you want to know what? This is our company town. It's not Louisiana's company town. So they can make as many post facilities they want down there, but at least that somebody at the top, paid attention to it and did something publicly. So that's really nice to see, and that was one of the things that it was one of the realizations I had from coming here.
Right. Place. And because that's a great perspective. Because you took it as a business. These are the components, and these are the clogs in the wheel, and this is how it works. That's a great perspective. Now, when you're in Chicago, is that just the mentality that you got being in the area, or did someone kind of explain something to you where you got to see that? Oh, I see. Okay, this town works this way, and these are its tools and its mechanism, and this town works this way, and this is its tools and mechanism. But it sounds like it's something very, profound. You have an interesting perspective. You see it like you mentioned, like a watch. These are the components. This is how it works.
And not so much as being a young guy. Being a young guy growing up where I grew up, you have, you have guys that our fathers are cops and firemen, and guys that work down at the board and guys that work in the blue collar trades, and you just sort of see how, look, I'm in 2 unions. No, none of my unions have got me a job, but I grew up watching unions get jobs for guys, and then when I went to school in New York City, and in a more sophisticated way, because guys that play football at Ivy League schools go work on Wall Street. So I have a lot of friends that are managing directors in banks and have had very successful careers, and not all rapacious. Some guys that do very good things and are terrific. I could name them by name if that was what this was about. But there are people that do good things out there that work in that business. But you started to see how that business sustained itself. And at least in my case, when I was done with college, I got a law degree. And, I even though I never practiced, I realized about halfway through it was not, certainly there was a future for me, but it didn't have anything to do with that.
Nothing with law?
No, nothing with law. Probably would have been more like Michael Clayton if I'd stayed in that. But,
well, okay.
But,
and made a movie about it. Perfect.
But you started to see how the industries took care of themselves and how they related. So when I got here, admittedly, once again, as a grad student at USC, it was just interesting to develop and to learn and to sort of see the same ebb and flow of commerce
right
in our business,
yes,
in entertainment, in show business, as
right.
I could identify just having friends that were going through their careers in other industries and growing up around a different industry. So,
and then adapted accordingly.
yes.
Very nice.
I'm still looking for the union that gets me a job, like my friends at the Draper Hangers Union.
That's right.
Back in the corner place.
Yeah, it's a lot different over here. A lot of footwork and a lot of shaking hands, right?
Yeah, that's okay.
George, man, fantastic. What great first segment. It gives great insight, because one of the things I like to get from my guests, especially who've been in the industry, those little nuggets of gold that can benefit others. To realize, hey, the work is hard, but it can pay off. And you're a great example of that. Here you are.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We're welcome. We've got to take a quick commercial break. But again, thank you for taking the time to coming in. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You bet. You bet. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you've been listening to The In Show. And we have in-studio guest, Mr. George Francisco, and we're going to be talking with him in our next segments, of course, and talking about his upcoming movie. So when you hang in there, we'll be right back. And this is The In Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. Good to be back with you today. That's right. We are broadcasting live from the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, and we have a great in-studio guest, Mr. George Francisco. George, I can hear the treasure trove of experience just flowing out of you.
And we are having a nice conversation.
And, you're the type of guest I enjoy. I mean, I can't think of one guest who doesn't have life experience or professional experience that is unable to share it. They're always willing to talk about, their lives, and I love to talk with my guests because it gives me and them an opportunity to bring stuff out that maybe they didn't remember or realize. And as I'm talking with you, I'm hearing all these little pearls, all these nuggets from, this is just from you growing up in Chicago. And we haven't even talked about your film career. We haven't talked about your film that you've made, which is, why we're here. And if you don't mind me exploring a little more.
Please do. Please do.
What was it like when you got here? So you got here back in, you said about 20 some odd years ago. So in mid-90s?
Right after the riots.
Right after the 90s?
Right after the riots, yeah. I bought low, bought in low.
Bought in low, when it was a great time to buy. What was your intention? Movies? Because I know you talked about writing already. So you came out here, I'm going to get into Hollywood. I'm going to become a script writer. How did that go?
I had always, throughout my life, and at least my educational career, I'd always been the best writer. I mean, I always, whatever I wrote, I got an A. You know, and we had joked earlier, but where I went to law school at Fordham, you got graded numerically. So I would invariably get a D on a test that I had to take, and I would invariably get an A to balance myself out to a C to keep on passing on. So it wasn't until I actually became a professional writer that I realized how bad of a writer I was. That was really sort of the startling thing. But I always felt I would be like James Michener. I always felt I would write these big historical compendiums, these novels and they were always going to be about Chicago, you know, which is why I fell in love with Frank Norris and Theodore Dreiser in the novels they wrote, because they were always sort of based in and out of Chicago. They were very Chicago-centric, Upton Sinclair. So I really sort of saw myself doing that. And somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't quite have, I just call it the chops. You know, I'll be very honest with you, I just don't have the skill to really craft sentences and words together as some do. I'm okay in an email. You know, I can turn a phrase pretty good in a script.
Right.
You know, I can sum it up pretty well, but I just really don't have those chops. And I realized that there was this thing called screenwriting.
Nice.
Who thought people wrote the movies? I was like every other person in America. You know, I mean, this is pre the sort of explosion of TMZ-ification of the entertainment business.
Yes.
And so my goal was to come out here, and I applied to graduate school at USC, and I got accepted to the graduate screenwriting program. And ironically, a friend of mine, it's roughly a friend, a guy named Andrew Marlowe, who had lived with one of my football teammates in Columbia, was there. He was graduating the year before me. Now, Andrew's obviously gone on to massive success. Very massively successful screenwriter, and, you know, created Castle, and great guy. And so he picked up the phone when he saw my name there. He called me up, and he said, "You got accepted." And I was like, and he reminded me who he was, because, you know, I did not remember several years later. He was getting out, and he had won the Nichols Fellowship, and I said, well, I could sort of immediately see my path. I would write something, and I would become successful. Famous last words on that one, right? So really, my goal was to be a guy who wrote Tom Cruise movies. Like, I really, you know, like, that's the type of guy. I'm going to write Die Hard, you know? I'm going to write these big star-driven movies. So when I got here, that was sort of in vogue. First script I wrote that got written up in the trades and that got me an agent was a period piece about the 1968 Harvard-Yale game, about a guy coming back from Vietnam and playing quarterback, based around this very famous fictional game. And it was a lot like Diner, and it was very character-driven, and it got me, I don't want to say a lot of recognition, you know, but it sort of, you know, gave me a career. But it was as far away from this idea I had in my head, this, you know, this, I don't want to say, you know, use him as a bad example, because he's been a friend over the years, but Shane Black, you know, the guy that keeps selling, Shane's awesome, by the way, he's a great guy, but the guy that keeps selling spec scripts and keeps upping his own ante, and they keep getting made, and they're these sort of cultural movies that everybody knows, and like that idea, all of a sudden I realized, same way I sort of realized that the James Michener thing was not working out for me. I was like, this is probably not going to work out for me. So everything became, at least, you know, write what you know, they say, write your passion. It became much more into sort of the James Seamus way of looking at things, character driven, and bringing that to what I could write. Now, that's sort of difficult. Maybe it was coming out of acting, and doing those things it's very difficult to sort of earn a living and to sort of break out to be a writer of note that way. But in terms of moving into being a director, and, you know, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of short PSAs and shorts and documentary style, you know, low shorts and commercial grade industrials has really been the meat of my career as a director. But, you know, a lot of those elements and feeling like I understood character helped me relate to the people I was working with, whether they were skilled talent in front of the camera or unskilled talent in front of the camera. And by unskilled, I just mean sort of normal people that you're talking to in documentary style settings. So it helped me in my way. That was my path. And certainly, you know, I mean, I written magazine articles. I've hustled and shucked and jive as a writer for as long as I could. But the experience or the realization of working on what I most readily brought to the table as a creative artist was a little bit different than sort of the idea I had in my head. And it wasn't like a bad awakening, but it was a process, just like a process that any artist has. You know, I mean, I have my process. I have friends that are architects. I have a very close friend that's an architect. He's a big idea guy. So he thinks and thinks and thinks and thinks, and boom! And there's a big idea, and he's gone, and he's designing. And me, I'm a little bit more like a gardener, I liken it to. Like, I just have to kick the dirt around every day, same time. If I haven't got the time to be an isolated gardener and sort of tend to this you know, thing that I'm creating, you know, it doesn't quite work for me. But not a bad realization, just a process. But it definitely is a difference between what I saw in myself, boots, and what happened when I got my boots on the ground, as
Right.
I like to say.
So when you now, let me ask you. It seems to be. As a matter of fact, I was having a conversation with someone recently, saying that success seems to always come from the left, from the side. You have this vision, and we pretty much were saying the same thing as we were talking about, you know, filmmaking and such. And they made a comment. Well, you know, this is what I really, you know, where my passion is, but it's been over here. It's been over here. And you just kind of shrug your shoulders. You go, well, you know, I go where I get paid, I suppose.
Or not. You know, my mom used to say something to me. She used to say, "You can't fight City Hall, kid." You know, I mean, you know when your parents say these things to you when you're growing
Right.
up,
Sure.
you think, what are you talking about? And it's terrible, because the older you get, the longer you go down the road, the more the more I quote that lady. I swear. You can't fight City Hall. You know what I mean? Go with, you know, you dance with who brung her. I got a million of these horrible cliches I bust out. People look at me like I'm crazy, but you know, I mean,
That's fantastic. That's
sometimes
fantastic.
you just have to go. You have to roll with it.
Right. The things that stay with you as you grow and you mature. Well, I guess we're always growing and maturing as we, you know, go through life. But someone always says something, or you see something. Have you ever read a book, saw a movie, or anything that stuck with you in the same kind of fashion? So we're talking about
Absolutely. Singularly, the thing that made me want to get into entertainment was Taxi Driver.
Nice.
And I don't even know if it's a cliched answer now. Maybe it is for, you know, people who like came of age looking at it.
Right.
I mean, I am certainly not coming of age in the 70s, but when I discovered it, and it was a really simple reason. For me, it does everything a film should do, because at the end, when you get to the end of the film, your point of view on what you're watching is just irrevocably changed.
Yes.
And it's a subtle magic, a subtle alchemy to it.
Right.
To take you from one place to another, even if it's an inch, but you are irrevocably cannot look at things the same way as you looked at them opening up at the beginning of that movie.
Nice.
And that was the thing that just, you know, having that experience sort of on an intellectual level, but also on an emotional level. So
Sure.
it was the single thing that made me understand, like, sort of my aha moment, I guess.
Right.
Was getting to the end of Taxi Driver the first time.
That's fantastic. Because I had made a comment to someone, and I told them, you know, for me, because I really enjoy film. Film is one of the things I really enjoy. I said, a great movie can be like a great poem or a great book when it's done that perfect, or maybe perfect to the person, that can inspire you.
Isn't that the
That can
beautiful thing
drive
about
you.
art? The beautiful thing about art is that it's open to everybody's interpretation, which is
Isn't that amazing?
fantastic. You know, and there's a fear of releasing it as a you know, it's something you created. You know, I hate getting it. I'm such a working class kid. I hate getting into these things about creator, and artist, and storyteller. You know,
Right, right.
You know, but in terms of, you know, you've invested yourself into something, and releasing it, it's going to affect people. However,
Yeah.
the worst is that it doesn't affect people.
Right.
It's people met and they move on.
Yeah.
On a level of literature, except in a much less visceral level than Taxi Driver, certainly On the Road.
Right.
And that's another cliched thing. Taxi Driver and On the Road, they're so cliched.
Right.
But by the time I got to the end of that, I was just like, that is how I want to live my life. Now, I don't mean driving an old DeSoto back and forth across the country.
Right.
But the ethos and the sense of, you know,
Yes.
there's that famous paragraph about when I want to go, I want to go.
Yes.
You know, about that sort of jazz sensibility, that beatnik sensibility of just
Right.
pulling the ripcord and going for it.
Right.
And I don't really have that in my background, but when I read that, it like I was like, that's the way you want to live life.
Right.
Very much so.
Right.
It had a big effect on me.
Yeah, that's great, because I remember, for me, it was as I thought about it, but for some reason I always came back to this particular scene in this sitcom. Remember Bosom Buddies?
Mm-hmm.
Peter Scolari,
Yeah,
Tom Hanks.
yeah.
I remember Tom Hanks going to a museum opening, and he saw the curator, all the guests were looking at this art, and it was just plain. And there was one that it was a huge white frame, white background with a red dot. And they're going, I remember
the episode.
You remember that one?
Uh-huh.
And they're talking about, the color scheme, blah, 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 blah. And Tom Hanks goes, it's the flag of China. And remember that? And I never forgot it. But I like talking about that and looking at it, because for me, talking about things that influence you, there's two perspectives. One is, look, it's common sense. It's playing right in front of your face, versus the other one. Can't you see the depth? Where you have literally 2 points of view, which is really, are you able to marry these and develop your own worldview? Now, that's such a great scene, because literally it's broken down the middle. You guys are foolish. It's the flag of China. You're an intellectual pygmy. You don't see the grand scope of it. And this is where, can you traverse, that great divide and see both? And just talking about scenes, you're talking about
Guys who wrote sitcoms back. I got a friend that probably wrote that episode. Guys who wrote sitcoms in that episode were terrific writers.
They were.
Do things like that.
Yeah.
I had it's funny because I in a lot of ways, and as you go along the road, as you grow up, as you get older, you're more sensitive to things, and it takes more, or maybe more obvious things to move you. But
Right.
Mark Tanzi's art, I don't know if you're familiar with the artist
Yeah.
Mark Tanzi. Mark Tanzi's art did the same thing to me as, sort of, beyond being an adult,
Right.
an older person now that's working in the industry and making his
Yes.
own way in the world. It had a very big influence on me, and it's that famous one where the painter is hanging off the ladder.
Yes.
And it's and he's painting over the newsprint. He's whitewashing the newsprint, which is the victory of man over media. But he's whitewashing his own shadow along with the newsprint. It was just about how much to me, it was about how much you give up
Right.
to win the victory
Yes.
as an individual against
Nice. Yeah.
the world, the masses, whatever it is. But as an individual,
Because as it's evolved, you may too become obsolete, or you may be, cutting your nose off to spite your face. Yeah, there's a lot of great depth in that. Fantastic.
yeah, big influence.
influence.
Mark Tanzi's
Yeah.
art.
Fantastic. Mark, got to take a quick commercial break again. Yeah, look at that, wonderful pearls of wisdom there. Great insight. So in our last segment, we have a whole segment to talk about your movie.
All right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, lots of funny stories about that.
All right.
Budget filmmaking.
Those are the best. At least when they're done, right? We have great memories.
That's right.
Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you're listening to The In Show. We have in-studio guest, Mr. George Francisco, and we're going to have a lot more of him in our last segment. So you hang in there. We'll be right back. This is The In Show, and I'm your host, Gus Summers. Good to be back with you today. We have a great in-studio guest, Mr. George Francisco. And now, the moment we've been waiting for.
Drum roll, please.
Drum roll. We're talking about your great movie. Title, please.
Kill Her, Not Me. Kill Her, Not Me, screening November 10th at the RIP Horror Film Festival in Long Beach at the Long Beach Arena at Cal State Long Beach.
Long Beach, yeah.
And it'll be playing at 7 o'clock Sunday night, closing night gala. They have a fantastic array of 47 films playing there. LJ and his entire team have done a terrific job to bring sort of a mini Comic-Con, Horror-Con here to Southern California, down there to Long Beach. This services a lot of people that are interested in that. Do it at a really unique time. This is their first premiere festival, so very proud that they selected us and gave us the honor of their closing night red carpet gala. So we're very proud of that. Please come out and support it. RIPHorrorFilmFest.com, I believe, but don't quote me on that. And I'm sure if I got it wrong, somebody's going to yell at me. So, but,
Well, we should find the link and make it available for everybody. So now tell us about your extraordinary work with filmmaking that you had in the process of making this film.
Well, all I really need to tell you is that on the second day of shooting up in Big Bear, California, 12 inches of snow arrived that hadn't been written in the script. So that is about what you need to know about this. No, but I jest, not about that. But in fact, the executive producer was there with me, and we had these 6 poor girls in a hot tub doing their prototypical women in danger hot tub scene. And it started to snow. And he looked up at the sky, and he looked at me, and he started laughing, and he just walked away. So I was he just said, "Make it work for yourself. Make it work for you, kid. Make it work for you." And he walked away. But we set out, myself and the producer, Peter McAlee, we set out to do a small film because they're difficult to do. When you don't have a lot of money to do them. And when you have 12 inches of snow that you don't have in the script, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But we set out to do a film. He asked me if I was interested in doing a film that would try to turn some of the genre elements on its head, and I said I'd be interested in doing the teen girl version of Glengarry Glen Ross. So he looked at me, and he paused for a second, as all producers do, and he said, "That's interesting," and he walked away. And about 12 days later, he and I were picking up the production vehicles to shoot our first morning of sort of driving shots. So what I had wanted to do and what Pete had wanted to do, and we've worked together for a very long time, but we had wanted to do something that would take the genre elements, 6 girls, cabin in the wood, in trouble, unseen killer, or supernatural killer, or threatening killer, however you want to break it down, and I don't want to say do it smarter, but just do it in a way that sort of defied expectations, as opposed to looking at it from the outside in, which is blood and guts and stabbings and, staying alive against the unseen enemy that's threatening you. It was really more about what was happening, what happens on the other side while they're being stalked and getting picked off, as opposed to one by one. So we put the girls together, and we tried to make it, I'm gonna go back to my character study stuff, but we tried to make it sort of a character study about how these girls would react to each other as characters and as competitive young women, just in general. And that was really where we took it.
In there, as actresses outside of the film, or they're inside the film, how their characters will react in the situation?
Inside the film, how the characters react.
Okay.
Although I think that when you're working with young actors, I think that they work overtime. Is that when
Yes.
you call cut, a lot of times they keep on working, and when you wrap for the day,
Yes.
they keep on working. So I think some of the characters carried over throughout the duration of the production period.
Very method, I suppose.
Yes, very method, I think. But we had a fantastic lead actress, and in a project like this, you really have to rely on the actors because, things change, and things change of necessity because of, you can't get a car when you need one, or you don't have enough money to, do all the blood, and, people have to sort of act their way through it. But we had a fantastic group of young actresses, but we had our lead actress was a young lady named Elizabeth Guest, and she is Jamie Lee Curtis's niece, and she's sort of a third-generation scream queen now. Obviously, Jamie Lee's mom was Janet Leigh, so it's Psycho, Halloween, and Kill Her, Not Me.
Yeah. And I just saw The Fog last night.
I'm really patting myself on the back on that one. I understand that, Gus. But she is such a talented. She's such a talented young actress. She's like a young thoroughbred. She just doesn't know how fast she can run, and it was
Right.
really interesting as a director and as somebody who's sort of been involved in acting since I was 8, 9. Whenever my mom booted me out of the house and said go down to Marquette Park and go to the drama class. It's interesting to see somebody has that much command and is willing to, every time she would extend herself and she could do it. It was just a great thing to see as a director because she would succeed, and she
Right.
would succeed in a way that I didn't expect it, which is always the beauty of watching actors work is,
Yes.
you have something in your head, but they do something and you're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? That's great. So she was a great help because I could sort of manipulate the structure of the film around her because of the strength of what she could do and
Right.
and the breadth and depth of what she brought to the role. So I was really lucky to work with her. It was her first feature, and there'll probably be many, many more for her. We also had a lot of great actresses in our cast, a young actress named Jenna Rocky, Amanda Tedesco, Elizabeth Siegel, Aaron Withrich, and the great Joanna Pakula and Tony Todd in
Tony
a
Todd.
role where he's not Candyman. He's not the bogeyman. So
Yes.
that was really great to work with all of them. I got a chance to work with really great actors, so it was very positive experience for me as a director. They really helped me out a lot.
And Tony Todd, the great Tony Todd.
He's a great dude.
Does he play a heavy? You gonna have?
He plays a good guy. He plays a
Hey,
detective that is trying to solve this.
Nice.
I
It's
don't-
nice to see him in good guy role. You always see him like in The Rock, the heavy, or the Candyman that you brought up.
He's always playing the boogeyman. He's always playing the bad guy. You know? So this time he was the good guy, and we,
Nice.
you know, he brought a real humanity. I always harp on like the humanity of the characters. That they're
Right.
not. It's sort of like an overused word for me, but the actor has to find out what's good about them. You can't play them two-dimensionally.
Nice.
Even
Right.
if they're, we had discussed, Tony and I, about a character who wakes up tired. And I said what was interesting to him, I said insomnia. So when I was younger, I'd have trouble sleeping.
Right.
And I said, people that have insomnia, it seems like it comes at a certain time. I was like, what if after this day, he never sleeps good again? This is the day that gives him insomnia. Because he can't sort of figure out this. He's trying to put the puzzle to his pieces together.
Right.
And it was really interesting to watch him become exhausted throughout the course of his performance.
Right.
And to always sort of inform what he was doing with the fact that this was a guy doing his job, which is something I can completely relate to, being a real working class kid.
Right.
So it was, whenever you work with people, I mean, hey, you're talking Tony Todd here. This guy's not Candyman. This guy spent his life acting.
Yes.
We're talking like, Arthur Miller scholarships. We're talking about Arthur Miller fellowships. I mean, this is a guy that has great depth in what he brings in terms of how he creates characters that, more people should see.
Right. Right. And give him a chance to explore that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was lucky that I got him doing this as opposed to a lot of the other ways where he's seen. And Tony, I mean, I ain't seen everything. So, there have been great other performances that weren't what you've been, sort of best known for. So.
That's fantastic. So at this point, so it's all done, and you're going to be screening it at the Horror Fest.
Yes, the RIP Horror Fest, rest in peace, R.I.P. Horror Fest.
Nice. And what's your plans? VOD, a release of some kind?
We will hopefully in the spring start to put together a limited theatrical release. I'll put words in the producer's mouth. They're really for the producer and the investors. I can only hope. But it's funny because we talk about films and we talk about how they're, we're so used to a film in a theater, and now films don't necessarily meet their proper audience because they go in a theater.
Right.
So I'd be I'd be pleased if it reaches its audience that enjoys it the most. I think that audience will be young girls, college-age girls, and their boyfriends. I think it would be very satisfying for them to see how girls react in a situation like this as opposed to how they react to a killer. So, we're trying to do that.
Right.
So hopefully we'll see it in theaters. We'll put a plan together in the spring, putting words in the producer's mouth here, that I'm sure I get yelled at every morning of production. I get yelled at for some reason. And I'm sure I'm gonna get yelled at now, but we have certainly hopes to put a plan together for theatrical, and after that, we're just starting to field offers for what will be the proper means of distribution for it.
Nice. So does it have a web, not a web page? Does it have, that too? Does it have a web page? Does it have a Facebook, Twitter? Does it have a campaign like that going yet?
We do not have a Twitter campaign or a Facebook page.
Okay.
And the website is merely a placeholder website.
Right.
But you can find information on it at the film festival.
Oh, beautiful. Fantastic. How about you personally? Are you really into the social aspect of it? Facebook, Twitter yourself?
No, I don't. To be really honest with you, I'm probably a little bit bad about that. I'm pretty good with getting my emails on my cell phone,
Nice.
and I'm pretty good with texting and staying. I like to stay connected,
Okay.
but I'm not an inveterate user of Facebook and Twitter and those things. Maybe if I have a real reason. There's a lot of one-way communication that goes on out there. Someday when I have a reason to communicate one way.
Oh,
We talked about this before. I like being in one-on-one conversations.
Right, right. And email seems to lend itself to that. You know, it's a little more private, and you're able to have that nice communication. It seems to be, I guess, in all the social media, that seems to be the most intimate. The email. That one-on-one, as
Yeah.
close as you can get to, without showing off. Look at me.
Well, I felt really bad one time. I have these Facebook friends, and I would get these. Every once in a while, I'd open it up, and I'd see all these things about how their kid ate like applesauce and took a poopy diaper. And, I saw so many of them.
Yes.
I like kids. I have no kids, as far as we know, but I like kids. But it became soul deadening. The one way, the broadcast of the minutia of their lives. That the
Right.
parsley on their salad was good, and if there's a picture of a mojito. Yeah, so I felt really bad because I was like, I'm defriending all these people because it became so infuriating every time I opened up the page once a week or whenever I did it.
Right.
And then one friend said, no, just click here and click there and just unfollow them in your timeline. So now it's great. Now, I just didn't want to insult anybody because to so many people, it's so important to be Facebook friends. And
Right.
you don't want to. If it's important to somebody, it's important to somebody. You don't want to be insulting to them.
Yes.
Especially when you like them. So.
Exactly. When they've taken the effort to try to connect with you and engage with you,
Yeah.
and you're like, can you not show me your burrito or your double decker taco? Or
This is a good question for conversation, and God help us. Hopefully, you're not a guy that takes pictures of your food. But I don't. I'm telling you, why do people take so many pictures of their food? You don't know.
You got me on that
Okay,
one.
well,
I'm not a food. For me, it looks great on my plate, but I've seen pictures of food. I don't think it looks that great. Sometimes when you look at a commercial on television, who took that shot of that particular cheeseburger? Someone needs a different lens on there.
Yes.
We digress.
Yes.
But George, thank you for coming in. Having a great time. So again, we can find the links on to your movie on the webpage. And what's the webpage address? And we can also find it at the its premiere at the Hollywood Film Fest.
Yeah, at the film festival.
I'm sure if you type in "kill her, not me."
KillHerNotMe.com.
Nice. Okay.
There's a Flickr page.
Oh, nice. Okay.
On Flickr.
All
If
right.
you
Production
search-
pics and such.
Yeah,
Nice.
there are production
Okay.
pages on probably if you. It's funny because I don't know how good their search tool is, but if you type in "Kill Her Not Me" on Flickr.com, you will find that. There should be a link on KillHerNotMe.com as well, which is our website.
Yes.
And I'm going to make a mad dash to try to find out the webpage for the Rest in Peace Film Horror Fest. Let's see. Probably not. Well, we will come back to that before the end of our time together. And we'll make sure.
Well, you can just forward me that, and when we put our page up, we'll put the link and everything up there so everyone
It's
can
really
get
great.
it.
Thank you. Put my name up on the internet and stuff.
Yeah,
That's
of
great.
course, of course. It's all about you.
No. Yes, it is riphorrorfest.com.
Fantastic.
riphorrorfilmfest.com. riphorrorfilmfest, one word.com.
Beautiful. George, again, thank you for taking the time and coming in. We're excited to see the film, and and hear so much more about your projects coming up. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me as a guest. It's been a real treat getting to spend some time with you, Gus. Really, it really has been.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks again. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you're listening to The In Show. And I had in-studio guest Mr. George Francisco. And, of course, you can visit theinshow.com, where you'll be able to see the links to his movie and all his upcoming things in the future. And, of course, be sure to look for us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and all those great social media sites. And, of course, ladies and gentlemen, Gus has left the building.